RegenerCast podcast. This podcast is not intended to treat, cure, mitigate, diagnose, or prevent any disease. Instead, it's intended to make you think and to bring you some of the latest advancements and innovations in the field of regenerative medicine. If you're interested in learning more, links will be provided, or you can join us at the Cell Surgical Conference, where many of our guests will be presenting live. Remember, always consult with your doctor before undergoing any medical or lifestyle changes. All right. Well, hey, I'm here with Dr. Nathan Bryan today. And Dr. Bryan, when anyone thinks of nitric oxide, if they're not thinking of you, then I don't know what's going on. Because whenever I think of nitric oxide, you are the nitric oxide guy. And I'm grateful for your time that you're spending with us today, giving us a little insight into what nitric oxide is and why, if you're involved in anything regenerative medicine, you need to be aware of nitric oxide and all the benefits that it has for your health. So would love to just get a little bit of your background. Tell us a little bit about why any regenerative medicine doctor needs to know about nitric oxide.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Sean. I mean, that's a great label to put on. I mean, I've spent 25 years in the basic sciences and clinical medicine trying to translate our discoveries of nitric oxide. But, this molecule was first discovered in the late 70s, early 80s. A Nobel Prize was awarded in 1998 for its discovery. And since then, I got in this field in the late 90s, early 2000s, and trying to figure out, number one, how does the human body produce nitric oxide? What does it do once it's produced? But perhaps more importantly, we have to understand what goes wrong in people that can't make it. What are the clinical consequences? And then how do we fix this underlying physiology? So obviously a lifetime of dedication in the trenches, in the lab, understanding the biochemistry and physiology of nitric oxide. We now have the answers to all of those questions. But nitric oxide is, it's an interesting molecule. It's a gas, and once it's produced in the body, it's gone in less than a second. But during that time it's around, it activates a number of different signaling processes. For instance, it regulates blood flow and blood pressure. It regulates inflammation. And in terms of regenerative medicine, it's the molecule that tells our own stem cells to mobilize and differentiate. So as you know, in response to injury or just in the aging process itself, we're currently wearing ourselves out, and it's the job of our own stem cells to mobilize, differentiate, and repair and replace dysfunctional tissues. So years ago, it was thought that the older we get, the less stem cells we have, and that was the cause of age-related disease. But a lot of work by what you've done and the people at Cell Surgical Network revealed to us that it's not the loss of the number of stem cells in the body, it's the loss of the signal that tells our own stem cells to mobilize and differentiate. And that's the role of nitric oxide. So the older we get, the less nitric oxide we make, and then we don't heal or recover because our stem cells don't have any function.
So nitric oxide now, I think, in my world, our world, is pretty sexy, right? It's cool. People are talking about it basically because of the work that you've done traveling the world to educate people on it. But there's no way it was like that, a couple of decades ago when you got started. How did you find yourself in the nitric oxide space to begin with?
Well, I was very fortunate to work alongside and meet the guys who won the Nobel Prize in 1998, and they really shaped the course of my career and really were collaborative. And in fact, it was Fred Murat who recruited me recruited me for my first faculty position at UT Medical School in Houston in the Institute of Molecular Medicine. So we knew nitric oxide was extremely important, but we didn't understand all it did and and really how the body makes it. So that was really my work, is those guys discovered that nitric oxide is a naturally produced molecule in the body of humans. And then my claim to fame is I've brought nitric oxide to life. We figured out how to deliver nitric oxide therapeutically in different form factors. And so, 25 years ago, there was very little awareness around nitric oxide. So we actually created this whole market to understand why people need to know what their nitric oxide production capabilities are, and then employ strategies and do things to restore nitric oxide. So, I've published over 100 peer-reviewed papers in the scientific literature, written half a dozen books or so. And but here's what I found is, number one, nobody reads the medical literature, scientific literature. The only way we reach the masses is through people like you, Sean, who, go out there and we tell a story and, talk about the importance of this so we can empower patients to take control of their own health and then to employ these strategies to heal and to for for the body to perform optimally. Because here's what we've learned in the basic sciences over the past 4 years. We know the mechanism of every single chronic disease out there. So we know how to diagnose it. We know how to fix it. The problem is just the translation of this information, not only to physicians, but to patients and consumers all around the world. So now we have the capability to go direct to the consumer, direct to the patient, inform and educate, so that now people can take control of their own health. And obviously nitric oxide is a critical part of that. It's foundational, but it's not a panacea. It's not an end-all be-all cure-all. We still have to address underlying disorders and deficiencies or toxin exposures. But I think what we're finding in the literature is that nitric oxide is foundational, and that your body cannot and will not heal without adequate nitric oxide production.
Absolutely. I think you can go talk all you want, but unless, you know, what you're actually talking about works, then it's not going out there. And that's the most important thing. I mean, I've seen it in my family where, you know, grandfather was on crazy heart meds, started adding nitric oxide to the regimen, got off all the heart meds. So stuff like that is where you actually know, you know, whether or not you have a good story, right? Because a good story.
No, look, that's a major source of my frustration. Somebody who's been in the basic sciences for 25 years, is you've got hundreds of nitric oxide companies and nitric oxide products out there that really provide zero nitric oxide benefit or availability whatsoever. So, and I take offense to that, because it could kill an entire industry. You know, you got people trying to sell nitric oxide in gummies and chews and capsules. You must be reminded that nitric oxide is a gas, and we have to deliver that bioactive gas. You know, in 2007, my group was the first to publish that nitric oxide was a hormone, and that changed the landscape of how we thought about nitric oxide. So we know today, you know, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of hormone replacement clinics. And so if you're deficient in testosterone, what do? Well, you take testosterone replacement therapy, right? They don't give you precursors and hopes your body can convert it into testosterone. In fact, that's the underlying basis for the deficiencies. So similar to nitric oxide, we don't give the patient precursors or substrates and hoping they can make it, because the reason they're deficient is they lost the ability to make it. So we have to give that actual molecule. And that's what we do that no one else has been able to do, is we deliver bioactive nitric oxide gas in a solid dose form. And we do it topically, we do it through a lozenge, we do it through fermented bee powder. But what makes us different is we deliver the gas. We replace the missing hormone, nitric oxide. But more importantly, we fix the reason your body can't make nitric oxide. So now we're basically improving your underlying biochemistry and physiology. And that's completely different. So all these other companies out there, these charlatans who are deceiving and frauding customers, number one, either because they're naive and they're ignorant on the science, or number two, and worse, some of these companies even know better, but they're deliberately defrauding their customers. And it's a problem, because I hear people all the time, they go, "Oh, Nathan, you talk about nitric oxide, but I've tried nitric oxide and it didn't work for me." And my response is, no, you didn't try nitric oxide. You were caught up in some marketing scheme that a company convinced you was nitric oxide, but it wasn't a nitric oxide product. So once people understand that and understand what we do and differentiates us from any other product or company out there, nitric oxide always works. It's a very potent molecule, and when you deliver this molecule, you see the clinical benefits.
Well, I'm going to go back and blame it on you to some degree, because I said you're the nitric oxide guy. It's sexy. People in this field know the importance of it, right? So it's similar to the stem cell space, where stem cells, like that sexy word, people are interested in it, and they're the good scientists and the good doctors, and then they're the people that are just trying to take advantage of a legitimate science out there. And if it wasn't working, and it wasn't something that was really critical and important, I don't think you'd have these charlatans or these frauds that are out there. And that comes with every industry. So again, now you got to hit the ground running on educating, and that's kind of what we're trying to do here, right? There's a lot of exciting things out there when we're promoting, you know, regenerative medicine and longevity and, you know, the whole anti-aging field. But what's right, what's good, what's wrong, and sorting out the good, bad, and ugly, right?
Yeah.
So.
No, look, I think the results speak for themselves. I mean, you certainly know that thousands, if not millions, of patients that have been helped by regenerative medicine and stem cells and all these regenerative medicine modalities. And similar to me, I get, you know, hundreds of text, emails, and phone calls every week from people that we've changed their lives. They tried our product and they saw the clinical improvement. And so that's the most important thing, is does it work? And then once you figure out it works, then we can work mechanistically and work backwards And once we understand mechanism, we can make everything we do better.
So tell me about I'm glad you brought it up, but tell me about mechanism. What's working that's producing nitric oxide when we're young and healthy that then stops working? And how do we know once it stopped working?
Well, you know, there's several ways. There's really two main pathways where the human body makes nitric oxide. There's an enzyme found in the lining of the blood vessels, what we call our endothelial cells. It's also found in our epithelial cells and our upper airway. But when activated, this enzyme produces nitric oxide, and that's what leads to vasodilation, an increase in oxygen and nutrient delivery. It mitigates vascular inflammation, prevents platelets becoming activated, clot formation, downregulates adhesion molecules, and really all aspects of vascular inflammation. But what we're finding is that enzyme becomes dysfunctional with age. And it's not just with age, it's all the known risk factors. For instance, sedentary lifestyle, a Western diet, smoking, lack of physical activity. Many prescription drugs actually cause endothelial dysfunction and shut down nitric oxide production. So it's really the Western lifestyle, diet, lifestyle, medications, pharmacotherapy that inhibit nitric oxide production that then put us at risk for really all age-related chronic disease, including cardiovascular disease, the #1 killer of men and women worldwide. So mechanistically, now we understand what leads to NOS uncoupling, what leads to endothelial dysfunction. We know how to mitigate that. We can recouple the NOS enzyme. We also understand that there are bacteria that live in and on our body that produce nitric oxide. We now have modalities that we can restore the microbiome, restore the function of these communities of bacteria, and completely replete nitric oxide production. So where the early population-based studies reveal that we lose nitric oxide production with age, that no longer has to be the case. You know, I turned 50 a couple of months ago, but I have the vascular age of a 32-year-old. So it doesn't mean that we're necessarily on that path. Mechanistically, we know how to fix it, we know how to repair it, and we can completely recapitulate and restore nitric oxide signaling and production.
So how do you know your nitric oxide levels are low? You know, you might have the cardiovascular health of a 32-year-old. I'm a 33-year-old. You know, when is it time for somebody like me or anyone else out there to start supplementing with nitric oxide?
Well, you know, I think because there's no kind of clinical lab or diagnostic like your cholesterol or vitamin D or triglycerides where you can draw blood and get a number. Because nitric oxide's a gas and we really can't pick it up in peripheral blood. So what we have to do is rely on symptoms. And the symptoms are if you start developing some degree of erectile dysfunction, and this is in both men and women, it's not just a male disease, then that's a sign of nitric oxide deficiency. If your blood pressure starts creeping up, then it tells us that your body's losing the ability to produce nitric oxide. If you can't sustain an exercise regimen and exercise, you know, kind of moderately for 15 or 20 minutes without completely getting out of breath and changes in heart activity or electrical activity, then that's a sign of nitric oxide deficiency. Metabolic disease, insulin resistance, diabetes, those are all symptoms of nitric oxide deficiency because nitric oxide is part of the insulin signaling pathway and involved in glucose uptake. So those are really the things we have to pay attention to, or if we get injured and we don't repair and recover as quickly as we did when we were younger, then that's a sign of nitric oxide deficiency. But I think there's two populations that I think benefit from nitric oxide. There's the people who may be older and suffering from, you know, erectile dysfunction, high blood pressure, metabolic disease, or who have overt diagnosed coronary disease or Alzheimer's. So it's the sick people who are looking to get better, where Western medicine has failed them, then look to nitric oxide as a solution. So that's kind of the broad population. But then, Sean, there's people like you and me who don't have any signs and symptoms. We have complete normal vascular function. We have normal blood pressure, normal exercise capacity that can benefit from nitric oxide because we live in a toxic world, toxic environment. And so we need that daily supplemental dose of nitric oxide to prevent that age-related decline in nitric oxide production. And that's a completely new audience because we as humans are programmed to be reactive, right? We're fear-based. We only make changes upon fear. Once we've had a heart attack, stroke, or, you know, we're faced with some medical crisis. And I think that reactive practice, the way medicine's been practiced for hundreds of years, is wrong. We have to be proactive. And I think we have to take steps today while we're young and healthy to prevent age-related disease. And as I mentioned before, we know mechanistically what causes every single chronic disease out there. Now we just got to take the steps, employ the science, and we can prevent age-related disease. It's really that simple.
Well, you're saying we have to take responsibility for our own health?
You know what? At the end of the day, that's exactly right. There is no silver bullet. There is no magic bullet. We have to take responsibility because what we're doing is not working. And you see that. That's why the regenerative medicine field is so important, because these modalities and these techniques have treated, cured, and prevented many diseases where Western medicine has failed. And that's the beauty of it. As you know, drugs and physicians don't heal patients, cells heal patients. Give the body what it needs, the body heals itself. We just got to get out of the way and take responsibility and learn from the science, what we've done for the past 20, 30 years, and just employ it.
Absolutely. Hey, two more questions before I let you go. One, when I first got into, the health kick and whatnot, I really picked up green tea, big antioxidant.
Yeah.
Nitric oxide, though, big antioxidant as well.
No, it is. Look, some of the mechanisms of the epicatechins found in green tea are stimulators or activators of nitric oxide production. But nitric oxide is a potent antioxidant. When we look at oxidative stress, what is that? It's oxygen radicals that extract electrons from biomolecules, cause oxidation, which is basically internal rust. Well, nitric oxide is an electron donor, which means that it combats the oxidative stress. It scavenges these oxygen radicals and actually downregulates the production of these oxygen radicals. So nitric oxide is probably one of the most antioxidant, anti-inflammatory molecules produced in the human body.
So that's why I supplement my green tea with a nitric oxide in the morning.
That's right.
And then talk about nitric oxide just briefly. Nitric oxide and immune health. Is there a correlation there?
Yeah, no doubt. One of the earliest discoveries, or one of the earliest observations that led to the discovery of nitric oxide, was in our immune cells. So when we're exposed to, let's take a virus, for example, because we've all survived COVID, and it looks like there's an impending new virus that's going to be upon us. But once we understand how the immune system works, then we don't have to be fearful for any viral infection or bacterial infection for that matter. So let's take COVID, for example, because we've learned a lot about that. It's a respiratory virus. It binds to the ACE receptors in the epithelial cells. It penetrates into the cells and then hijacks our DNA or RNA, and it replicates and propagates throughout the body, causes inflammation, and makes us sick. Well, in a normal person with a robust immune system, when we start to get viral attack and we get attachment, then that signals our immune cells, hey, we're being attacked. Let's go to the site of attachment, go to the enemy site, and let's mobilize a response. Macrophages, neutrophils, monocytes go to that site, generate a lot of nitric oxide, and nitric oxide actually prevents the virus from replicating. The other important thing is if you can maintain healthy nitric oxide levels, that downregulates the ACE2 receptors, which is the binding site for COVID. And there are other molecules and binding sites for different respiratory viruses. But if you downregulate the ACE2 receptor, there's less active sites for the COVID virus to bind. And then even if it does bind, the nitric oxide prevents it from replicating and propagating throughout the body. So what have we learned? We know that the people that got sick and died from COVID were the people who couldn't make nitric oxide. The elderly, African Americans, people with previous heart attack, diabetics, people with a number of comorbidities, people on ACE inhibitors, ARBs that actually upregulate the ACE2 receptor. So as long as you can maintain healthy nitric oxide levels, your immune system can actually mitigate and prevent any sickness or illness from virus. I'm the best example. I don't wear a mask even for 4 years through COVID. And I was in we had 26 clinical sites around the US for our COVID drug study. And yet I've never been sick with COVID. And I was exposed to these viruses all day, every day. I'm on a plane every week for the past 4 years. And yet I've never been sick from a viral infection in more than 20 years. It's not that I live in an aseptic, environment. It's just that my immune system knows how to deal with this, prevents me from getting sick from viruses because it's part of the innate immune response. And we have to support that.
I heard Texans were built stronger too, but that's a whole other thing.
Oh, no, that's right.
Yeah. Hey, last thing, you talked about a lot of other nitric oxide, kind of wannabes out there. If someone's interested in your nitric oxide stuff, where do they go find it?
Well, our website is n101.com. That's the letter N, the number 1, the letter O, number 1, .com is in one nitrogen, one oxygen.com. But those are products. But I'm not here to sell products. I'm here to provide education and awareness. So I send people to my YouTube channel. I encourage people to subscribe. We do lectures, podcasts. We'll actually host this podcast on the YouTube channel. But my objective is to educate and inform people on nitric oxide so they can make informed decisions on what may be best for them. And, it's really changes in diet, changes in lifestyle. And as a last resort, we can supplement and provide product technology. But I think that's the overall objective, is the education and awareness. And then if you're thinking about undergoing some regenerative practice, whether it's mobilization of stem cells, autologous stem cells, then, what we're finding, and this is all anecdotal, it's very difficult to do controlled clinical trials in regenerative medicine because there's so many confounding factors. But if you can take the nitric oxide, replete and restore nitric oxide prior to the deployment of stem cells, then we seem to get better outcomes. Because if you're going to deploy stem cells intravenously and you've got compromised blood flow, these cells are not going to get to the site where they need to go because of the roadblocks and the chronic vasoconstriction and the focal ischemia. So if we take the nitric oxide and we open up the blood vessels, now we can get better deployment, better delivery, better homing in at the site of repair, and you get better outcomes. So that's the important thing. And so in that regard, really our product technology is the only product out there that does that produces nitric oxide. If your body can't make it, we do it for you, and we improve the body's ability to make it on its own.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Dr. Bryan, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're busy, so it means a lot. And look forward to seeing you at the Cell Surgical Conference here in a few months. We always appreciate your education because, like you said, we're interested in stem cells, but if the stem cells can't go where you want them to go because you got poor cardiovascular health, then what good are they, right? So
Yeah,
that's where nitric oxide and the work that you've done pioneering and the education that you provide for us and all of our colleagues is absolutely instrumental in getting to the next level in regenerative medicine. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean. Like
Appreciate it.
The Cell Surgical Conference is my favorite conference of the year. I give 30 or 40 lectures all around the world every year, but one of my favorite, and I think most impactful, is the Cell Surgical Network and the work you guys are doing, because it's really a collaborative effort bringing in different areas of expertise with one goal in mind, and that's to make what we do work better in every single patient. So thanks for the work you do. It's a pleasure and honor to be with you.
Amen to that, and right back at you. So we'll see you soon.
Take care.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of RegeneCast. If you'd like to learn more about topics like this or the latest in regenerative medicine, be sure to check out the Cell Surgical Conference this June 6th through 8th at the Wynn, Las Vegas. Visit cellsurgicalconference.com and register today. You can save on registration when you use discount code POD. That's P-O-D, POD. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to share it, pass it on to your friends. Thanks a lot.